Go ahead, picture it, the golden years. You know that time of leisure, travel, and total freedom. It's supposed to be a reward after a lifetime of work. It feels like it's always been a part of life, doesn't it?
But what if I told you that wasn't true? What if you were just expected to work until you literally couldn't anymore?
Because for almost all of human history, that wasn't a what if. That was just life. The idea of retirement isn't some timeless fact. It's an invention. And, a pretty recent one at that. So that begs the question, right? If retirement was invented, who invented it? And more importantly, why? You see, the whole idea of the golden years is barely a century old. It was born out of a massive crisis that totally reshaped the world we live in. Welcome to the chronicler's desk, where we dig up the hidden histories of the world all around us. Let's get into it. Okay, so to really get how big of a deal this invention was, we have to first imagine what the world was like without it. Before all the factories and big cities, a person's value actually went up with age. Think about it. In an agricultural world, you owned land. You had decades of hard-earned knowledge. You were the one in charge. But then the Industrial Revolution came along and just flipped that whole script. Suddenly, your value was all about speed and physical strength on an assembly line. And older workers, they just couldn't keep up. For the first time ever, getting old became a liability. Yeah, as this quote points out, the transition used to be pretty natural. You'd just kind of shift to different jobs. Less physical stuff within your family or community. You were still a crucial part of things. But a factory? A factory has no room for advisory roles. So the factory didn't just change how we worked. It completely changed how we aged. And in doing so, it created a problem that society had never, ever faced before. This industrial boom created a whole new group of people, folks who were pushed out of the workforce because of their age, but were still very much alive. A lot of them had no savings, no family farm to go back to. They called this new crisis superannuation, basically being too old to work, but too young to die. Now, the first attempt at a solution, you might be surprised to hear, didn't come from the government. It came from the very corporations that helped create the problem in the first place. And let's be clear, these first pensions weren't just some nice charitable gift. They were a really smart business tool. Companies use them to gently push out older, less productive workers, while at the same time giving younger employees a massive reason to stay loyal for decades, all for that promise of a pension at the end of the road. But these corporate pensions, they only covered a tiny fraction of workers. It was going to take a full-blown national catastrophe, the Great Depression, to turn retirement from a company perk into something that felt like a basic social right. This right here, this is the moment everything changes. 1935. The U.S. government finally steps in and says, you know what? Old age poverty is a national problem and it needs a national solution. And just like that, the Social Security Act was born, creating a safety net for millions of Americans. But there's a really important detail buried in the fine print. This brand new safety net, it didn't cover everyone, not by a long shot. The original Social Security Act specifically left out agricultural workers and domestic workers. And because of the kinds of jobs available to them at the time, this meant that about 2/3, 65% of all African-American workers were completely excluded from the single biggest social program of the 20th century. When we pull back the curtain on something we just take for granted, like retirement, it kind of forces us to see our own world a little differently, doesn't it? And hey, if you're finding this kind of deep dive valuable, connecting the dots between the past and your life right now, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It really does help us keep uncovering these hidden stories for you. All right, so after World War II, the economy started booming, and the whole idea of retirement just exploded and went totally mainstream and became a huge part of the American dream. By the late 1960s, things were really looking good. The economy was humming, unions were strong, and Social Security had been expanded to cover more people. On top of all that, about half of all workers in the private sector now had a pension. This was it. This was the absolute peak, the golden age of retirement. But just as that dream became a part of our culture, the very foundation it was built on started to crack. A huge shift was coming, one that we'd completely redefine retirement all over again. Now, this right here is probably the single most important change in the last 50 years. We went from defined benefit plans, that's your classic pension, where the company guarantees you a check every month for life, to defined contribution plans, like a 401k. The huge difference?
It's all about risk. That risk shifted from the company straight onto your shoulders, the employee. And that's pretty much the world most of us are living in today. The certainty of that lifelong pension has been replaced by the total uncertainty of the stock market. The entire burden of saving, of investing, of planning for a future you can't predict, it now rests almost completely on you. So all of this leaves us with one final big thought. Retirement, as we know it, was an invention. It was a machine designed to solve the problems of an industrial society. But we don't live in that society anymore. So the real question is that invention still working? And if it's not, what new idea are we going to have to invent to solve the problems of our time?